Welcome, everyone, to The Sonic Truth. I'm Justin. To my left, we have Chris. And today we have special guest, Linda Taylor, the guitarist for Whose Line Is It Anyway? Welcome, Linda.
Thank you, Justin. Hey, Chris. Good to see you both.
Nice to see you.
Are you in Southern California?
I am. Yeah, Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. Are you born and raised in California?
Yeah, actually I was.
Wow, a true Californian.
Wow.
Like that. Now, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got started to become a guitar player?
Yeah, I actually started when I was 3.
Wow.
I think I must have saw somebody playing, probably Glenn Campbell on TV. You know, they had the variety shows back in the day. And he had a killer one, and he's always been, this killer guitar player. And so I probably saw it that way. My parents weren't really into music, so it wasn't like, my dad was a professional trumpet player. My dad, no. He had one 8-track tape of Frank Sinatra in the back of his car and it stayed there forever. I don't even think it ever moved. So
good 8-track tape, though.
Right. So yeah, I started young, and I've just been doing it ever since. I'm not sure how it quite got to the place where it's at, but it's never been something I questioned. So everything was all studying and all school. Everything was designed toward the pursuit of music.
Now, are you self-taught, or did you go to music school or anything throughout your early years?
A little of both. So my parents insisted that I have a teacher, and so she came to the house once a week for my Mel Bay guitar lessons. And I immediately learned to read music on the guitar, which has actually been, a great skill to have. It's something that's how I was taught. There have been a few sacrifices, I think, with that. I didn't learn to play Stairway to Heaven by transcribing. I learned it because I read the music. So the ear training had to come a little bit later. I did do some studies in college, but I like to think I'm self-taught, and I've been working really hard at my studying. I still have online classes that I'm taking, and I'm chasing teachers all the time. So I'm really chasing it.
Now, are you a teacher? Do you teach guitar to anyone?
You actually caught me. Yes, I have taught, and I'm going to jump into the Patron channel.
Yeah,
so
Patron.
The Patron channel.
I like that much better.
It's going to be great. We're going to discuss all things Patron. Yeah, I'm editing videos, so I'm sitting here staring at myself, and I've been doing it for 2 days, and it's just, I got to get out of the house.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that's the worst, editing yourself. Yeah.
It really is. And you just sit here and it's like, there's got to be a better angle. And it's just over and over.
Yeah, I like just asking, does it look good? And then, okay, and then never look at it. Yeah. Because it'll definitely mess with you if you're looking at yourself that much and you see things other people don't.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's terrible. So, in a perfect world, I would just hand it to somebody and let them do it. But here I am reading, Final Cut Pro tutorials and trying to figure this out. But I think I get asked a lot of questions just very offhandedly by some colleagues, and I think if I can structure this channel towards sort of answering those questions and, getting somebody up to speed quickly, without years and years of study, just sort of like, here's how I would approach this, and get something in their fingers immediately that they can just start using. They can do the deep dive on it later on their own time. But I think that's where I might be useful.
Very cool.
That's awesome. I know Justin mentioned, the Whose Line Is It Anyways, but you've done a lot of touring as well.
Yeah.
And do you find that you prefer the studio or touring? Like, do you have a preference or a favorite, I guess?
I hate touring.
Answers that.
Yeah, I love the studio. It just feels more creative. Touring is great, but I was thinking about this the other day. I had some teachers who were doing a residency, and I just thought how nice that would be to just wake up every morning, do your thing in your own place, get your vibe on, and then go and play that residency every night. Touring is sort of a young man's game. I mean, once you're on stage, it's great, but there's so many hours you're not on stage, and then you're kind of, I used to tell myself, well, I'm going to practice. I'm going to do some serious shedding. Where are you going to shed? On the bus, in a hotel room? You're looking for a laundromat. You got to eat because you don't know what time sound check is. It's just the point of being out there to me gets really overwhelmed by the physicality of being out there. And I've done all the tours. I've done, I drove the van, and I've been the pampered poodle on the first class ticket, and I would rather be in the studio. No hesitation.
Yeah. Well, I think, what we'd rather do, obviously, making studio gear and that, but
yeah.
Yeah, no, I was just curious your thoughts on that. Yeah, because you're right. You get out there and your whole basic needs are upended. How do I?
Yeah.
I'm in this weird place. How do I get this? How do I do this? The amount of time to even just research that can just
overwhelming.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So,
yeah. And when I started touring, this is kind of a long time ago. So if there was an amp, you brought the amp. I remember having my rack mount Mesa Boogies and the speakers for a jazz gig, and they're all going on the plane. And I would sit on the plane and watch somebody just sort of push it out of the cargo bay, and it would bounce off the treadmill onto the tarmac.
Nice.
And I mean, it's a different world now, but it was brutal. I mean, I've got delay pedals from Jakarta because when I got there, everything was blown up. So I had to find a cab, get to, the Jakartan version of Guitar Center and buy a delay pedal. And when I look at the price on that, it's like they saw me coming. Some cheap Boss pedal that probably cost me, US version of $400, and I had to have it, because it was destroyed on the plane. It's a rough world.
It is. It breaks your heart when you see them throwing the gear.
Oh, absolutely.
That's sometimes even just shipping gear. We would see, ring videos from people.
Yeah.
It can be quite
They
humorous.
drop it.
Yeah. We had one guy, I think there was a video at a really famous studio, and that they sent us a video of them lunging it over because they had a whole gate or whatever. They just lunged it over the gate, and yeah,
ouch.
They have
the worst part would be
do that kind of damage. They really have to.
I couldn't imagine sitting on the plane looking out and seeing them toss your amps, just knowing you got to perform later that night and hoping that it's going to work for you.
Yeah, it's just. So there's always the equipment drama, and that's still happening. But I think the primary thing for me with touring is that I always felt least creative. It was very much just about physically getting somewhere and being okay once you're there and ready to go, even though, whatever you do physically, whatever exercise, whatever kind of food you eat, taking care of yourself physically may not be happening. So, but you still got to get out there and perform. So, studio, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
Same.
Agreed. That's why we're in the studio.
Yeah. So I know you sort of ran into us a little bit early on. We were talking earlier, and you said you have a couple bus comps and an opto over there. Do you remember when you first ran into Audioscape at all, or heard about us?
It's going to be right when I bought the first bus comp. I have a friend, Larry Getz, who he had a studio out here. He's moved to Nashville now, engineer, songwriter, producer. And I kind of base all my studio purchases off his blessings, right? He's like, you got to check this company out. And at the time I was borrowing his, is it the FXG 354? What's the SSL version of that?
Oh yeah, the 354.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do I have that right?
Yep.
Yeah, the dark gray rack.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I was borrowing one of his, and so it was 30 years old, and had been in a commercial room, and smoked on, leaned on, stepped on, and everything, but it had a vibe. And I was like, I got to get, he's like, you don't need to be spending this kind of money on one of these that isn't that good anymore, and here's this company that is bringing these designs back to life, and they're doing it solid, and they're doing it real. Get one. And I just did. So I want to say maybe 5-6 years ago. It was early on.
It was I would say like what we call the early adopter range of the company. Because we've only been around, we technically started 2016 with the bus comp. So is when we first started. So it was a long, I guess it's been almost 8 years now. Yeah. So
I may have been that early in it. I feel like it was.
Yeah, I feel like
it
was
pretty new. And he was just like, you've got to check this out. So I had, when I got the bus comp, I had the SSL and did a little comparison, and it was just, I prefer the bus comp, and the SSL one was just, I don't know, it was a little tired sounding. And of course it could be, the age of it and components and everything, but all of this gear is that extra something, that extra 10-20%. It's like, running your signals through it, it means something. You can hear it, and I love it. All of this stuff stays. I've got old DBXs here, 160Xs from when I was 25 years old. It stays. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah. And you brought up actually something interesting there, because if the unit's 30 something years old or 30 plus years old, it's probably going to sound tired. Especially if it's not used a lot. Like say if it's sat for 5 or 10 years without being turned on, what'll happen is those caps, those electrolytic caps, they'll start to dry out. And that's really what starts to make things sound tired. And that's why they always recommend a recap and things like that on any old gear you get. But there's so many things that can
go wrong.
I've had my hands in, a lot of old things where and then sometimes you get something that's just super old and you turn on, it just works, and you're like, okay, that's cool. And then
like your mic.
Yeah. I got this mic a couple years ago. It was brand new. This is one of the, I guess, lesser known RCA ribbon mics. It's SK46.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like one of those sleeper ones, or I don't know if it's super rare, but it's like if you know kind of mics, I guess. But we just dug it out, and we're running mine through V1290 right now. So running this, I think it's SK46 is the model.
Yeah.
Nice. I'll be Googling that.
Yeah, check it out. It's cool.
I will.
Yeah.
Now, during the time how long have you been with the show? Whose line is it anyway?
Ooh, well, we're still filming. We actually filmed last year. I want to say I started that in the late 90s. I think I think Laura did the first season by herself, and then I came in on the second season. So we've known each other forever and been doing it forever. And it's so funny. I went into that gig kind of hesitant. It just felt like, so music is a joke and we're just making fun of it. And I don't want people to think I think this is what R&B sounds like,
Yeah.
And then I have learned so much from that gig. It's there's so many benefits to it. I mean, the easy one, first, it just helps me keep the current vocabulary. The second we go into production, I'm just like scrolling and listening to everything and trying to sort of wrap my ears around everything. And let's face it, when you're working, a lot of that goes away. So that need to stay current on everything, I have to have it. It puts me back in touch with gear, some products that I may not have, checked out, especially with regards to like drum machines and stuff like that. Working with Laura is a delight. She is just so dialed into improv and this style. She started Second City in Chicago. And
wow.
Yeah. And the guys are amazing. And it never seems to go away. As a matter of fact, I just played like a few weeks ago, I did the Pantages, The Wiz. Wayne Brady is The Wiz before they went to Broadway. So
sweet.
Again, I'm playing with them, you know. So yeah, it's been a while, but wow, what a great ride, you know. What an education.
Now, since it is an improv show,
Yeah.
how do you go about laying the music bed? Do you perform live with the comedians?
Oh yeah,
Or do you?
That's all live. What we do, Laura and I will get together. When she lived in town, she's since moved from LA to Chicago, but we would get together usually at my place and just jam and spend a few days jamming. And that's what we did this last time. We hadn't done it in a while, so we were a little rusty. So I just rented us a rehearsal studio, got it locked out for a couple of days, and just bring all the gear in. And it's just sort of like, okay, so if they want something like Bruno Mars, you know, what do we got? And a lot of it's just filtering through your loops and coming up with stuff. And if they want this, and just trying to organize your vocabulary a little bit. And then great plans go away because it's improv. They call something and we're just screaming at each other, you know, off camera. Go to the 4. Which one? The other one.
You got to be quick on your feet.
Yeah, everything just changes
quick.
In the moment there.
Yeah. When it works, it's awesome. And when it fails, which is probably as much, they air that and it's even funnier. So it's a win-win.
Oh, that's cool. Now, who were the hosts that you have worked with? Was it Drew Carey and Wayne Brady? Was he a host at one time, or has he always been a comedian?
No, Wayne is one of the cast members. So the two hosts have been Drew Carey. Well, Clive in London did the original shows in the UK. And then Drew did the first one here. So I worked with Drew for a couple of years. And since then, it's been Aisha Tyler.
Wow. Now, Wayne Brady, he's a singer too, isn't he?
He is. He does a lot of musicals. So he is now on Broadway with The Wiz. And let's see, Jeff Davis and Greg Proops and Ryan Stiles are currently touring with Who's Live Is It Anyway? And I think Laura will sometimes work with them. So the group stays together in all sorts of different configurations, you know. And of course, Charles Esten, Chip, how we knew him. He was on the show for a long time and then went on to Nashville. And I think he just released an album. So.
Now, are you also a composer? Have you done any musical compositions? Well, first of all, do you play any other instruments besides guitar?
I can do serviceable bass for when I'm working here that I usually just have a bass player replace unless it's just something very meat and potatoes. But no, guitar is where I focus. I'm a producer. I'm a composer. I've done film scoring and documentaries. Just had an album come out with an artist named Sarah Nimitz that I produced and co-wrote. And we did that pretty much all remotely during COVID. And so it was just a matter of, it was great. It was just sending ideas back and forth and just working completely remotely. And she'd sing something onto the iPhone and send it to me. And we just sit there and text and talk about what it could be and figure it out that way. And I did all the pre-production tracking here. And then we finally went into a studio for 4 days. Robbie Krieger, the guitarist for the Doors, he has a studio out here, beautiful room. So we were there for 4 days and just cut it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's kind of all over the map. So it's teaching and session work and composing, and you know, as you guys know, it's just you can't just be a fireman anymore. You just have to be everything.
Right.
It keeps it interesting, though. You know,
Yeah.
It's like if we just made one product, it would be, you get bored really quick.
Yeah.
So, I think also with the pandemic, that was a really interesting time for a lot of people where things sort of shifted and changed in the world, obviously. And I think that was one of the coolest things to come out of that was people could connect remotely and you could see. I feel like it finally, like QR codes finally became a thing, right? And all this other stuff started happening that like it became viable. So now I don't think there's still people working remotely because of that.
Yeah, I was going to say there's still a lot of writing sessions where it's still done remotely, but
it was
having
fun
that
for me.
It's definitely, it was a challenge to begin with, right? Because a lot of people that you're working with, musicians, they weren't technically inclined. So to capture the sound they're trying to capture remotely was a little bit of a challenge. But once they got it, that a lot of songwriters still do that to this day, rather than getting in a room together and collaborating, which to me I enjoy much more. But hey, the remoting has brought about a lot of different composers that we may not have heard from before.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, even just internationally, there's sometimes there's people halfway across the world, or you could work with someone in Australia or New Zealand a lot easier nowadays than you could, I feel like, before the pandemic. So
it really is doable. I haven't ever really done the Nashville writing, the all in one room, and you do it over 90 minutes. I've worked with people who've done that a lot. That I don't think I'd be very good or comfortable there.
It's like a big jam session.
Yeah, and there's something to having a little bit of time after the idea first, is brought forth to see what else it could be. Maybe this is obvious to put it here, but what if we went somewhere else with it? And what else could it be? And it's sort of that luxury of time to find the song, and then push it. How far can you go? And then break it, and then bring it back and see what else comes out of it, And I don't know, that sounds scary to me, that Nashville vibe of, I've got 3 a day, man. I'm writing from 10 to 11:30. It's like, I don't think I could tune between 10 and 11:30. So yeah, that was, it was different and was new, but I'm not afraid of working remotely. I like it a lot. Gives everybody the space to see their idea through.
True, and everybody gets to work on their own gear that they're familiar with as well.
Yeah, they have that luxury. Yeah, everybody gets to work from home in a sense,
Can't beat that.
No, definitely.
So how do you go about using, you said you had 2 bus comps and an opto.
Mm-hmm. Everything's in line. I've got a patch bay, and so I'm running Pro Tools, and they're all hardware inserts, except for the opto comp. That is actually in line. So I go out of my one channel, my Neve, into the Opticomp, and then to the API 550 before the interface. And that's my default place for acoustics and bass. And then, and this has been interesting, any kind of work that requires IRs, direct electric, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hit the Opticomp and hit it hard. It makes a world of difference. I think we're still missing the compression from the speakers. The IRs are great, but it is what it is. And sometimes we just can't avoid it. That's how we have to work. Running it through the Opticomp I just figured this out recently. It's great. And I'm like, with bass or acoustics, I just sort of kiss it, just touch it a little bit, For the IR stuff, hit it. Go 5, go -7 dB, hit it hard. And it's a world of difference.
Wow. Yeah, that's actually something, I don't think you just sort of stumble on something like that. I feel like you don't think in those terms. Like you would think, yes, acoustic or bass, just a little bit like that, but hitting IRs with it. And then there is something really cool about the Opto too, when you start getting on it. Like I love the way, that's actually one of the tests. Like we sort of, with the gear here, we sort of try to break it all the time. That's like, as far as sonically, like we're trying to push it to the edge, and like, how does this thing fall apart? And that's like how we select a lot of the tubes in the compression section, as far as like, we just crank the snot out of it and just, hit it really hard and sweep that HF control.
Because you guys are hand rolling tubes for these, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And new old stock?
Yep. And new old stock, and we test them on our 1950s TV7 military tube tester when they come in. We're getting tubes in every day here, basically, and so we literally, it's obviously we're rolling them for noise specs in the audio section and things like that, but we're also it's tone, it's how it reacts in the side chain. You could throw any tube in the side chain and it's going to work. It's not subject to noise as much really because you're not hearing the audio part of it, but how it reacts when it's under duress is extremely important. That's how we select those particular tubes. And I love that about the Opto. It can get like that kind of rubber band effect. Once you start getting around 7 dB and up, it does something to it where it just
artifacts.
It grabs it in such a pleasing way. So and it doesn't. So you could quickly tell, like, oh, this is starting to crap out if you got a bad, like 6AQ5 tube, what we call the squash tube. You know, if you get
squash tube, is that the name of it? Okay.
I call it, unofficially, I call it the squash tube. But if you got a bad squash tube in there, then it's gonna distort in a not pleasant way, I guess you could say.
Now, here's a question for you, Chris. Of all the tubes that you receive, say you get a shipment of 100 today, how many tubes would you have to go through to find the right match and setup for each Opto?
Oh, sometimes you spend as long tube rolling as we do building a unit. That's one thing that I don't think people realize. And then there's also, it does affect the data of how it reacts, like, you know, how much compression there is overall, even though there is actually a stereo adjust trim pot inside the Opto. So if you want less overall compression, you feel it's grabby, sometimes you've told people to go in there and tweak that back a little bit. I personally prefer it more wide open and just having maximum compression available and just use the peak reduction control, but everyone's different. But as going back to your tube question, basically, you know, tubes can be a crapshoot sometimes. We get batches in all the time. It's sometimes especially for that first position tube, the audio tube, the 12AX7, that's all the way, if you're looking at the Opto, it's all the way left with the front panel facing you.
Gotcha.
That tube is most critical for noise. And it's like, I feel like that's like 1 in 100 12AX7s just to find that magic one, that
the 1%er.
And then people will email us. I've said this before, but people will email us and be like, hey, I'm going to go swap the tubes.
I'm like, no, you don't want to do that.
And then I just die inside because we work so hard, you know.
And I die inside. Yeah, tube rolling is a big part of my day.
Yeah, I can imagine.
There's always, and some of these amps are quite old, and so I've got, you know, it's like we're talking about drugs. I've got my guy, you know, and tubes, you know, new old stock, and you always can come through like with some Amperix Bugle Boys or the RCAs, and it's huge. I can't imagine how you're doing that and how many hours that takes. It's what you said. It's probably longer than building the unit itself.
Yeah,
I'm always looking for tubes. If I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm not sleeping, I'm looking for tubes.
I'm a tube fiend. Give me some tubes. Now, do you have a favorite guitar or a particular rig setup that you prefer to use when working in the studio? I know it's going to be dependent on the style of music that you're working on, but is there a go-to that you always want to gravitate towards when you're writing?
No, I like to keep my thin line out just because it's an ore, and, you know, the changes in weather don't affect it that much. And it's just right by, you know, if I walk by, it's just there. I can play something. It doesn't have to be a thing. The Gibsons, the Les Paul, the 335s, they're precious. You got to keep them in the case. Going to move. You don't pick them up for a week. They're going to be needing another setup. They're a little fussy, you know. In the studio, it's just whatever will get the job done. They're really tools, and it's just, you know, it's like picking a comp, you know, whatever is going to work best there. And as far as amps go, I guess the divided, the FTR would be. If I could only take one amp to a studio, I'd probably do that one just because it's the most flexible. Takes pedals really well. If I have a better idea of what we're doing, you know, it's not going to be a surprise, then one of the Marshalls would be lovely because the cleans on them are just spectacular. So I would rather not walk in a room with a dolly full of amp heads. kind of ruins me for the rest of the day, but it's just whatever gets the job done.
Good deal. Now you got to hire a roadie, so you can at least take all your toys with you.
I know.
Hire a roadie who does video editing is what I'd recommend.
Exactly.
Yes.
Boom.
That's so hard.
And just like you have to be versatile. Just let them know, you've got to bounce around and be.
So I've been very curious. I've seen a couple hardware companies that have, they're sort of embracing making plugins. Are you guys getting nagged to do that, to go the digital way as well?
We have actually done a couple plugin releases to date. We've done the Reverb and the Golden 58, which are kind of more original offerings from us to start. I feel like they offer something kind of different in that domain. Like we've been sort of just dipping our toes in. It's not. I'm not sure if we're going to go full bore or not yet, but the reaction's actually been really good and really positive to what we've done so far. The Reverb I think is really cool because what we did is I sent Eddie from Kybe Audio. I sent him the original XL305, and then we sent him the new one that we do, and they're totally different. So we have them so in the plugin you can check out both. Mm-hmm. And they're
far out.
Yeah, I like the educational aspect of it. Just maybe the nerd side of me saying, this is what we changed, and it's one thing to write that in a product description. It's another to actually just hit a toggle switch and hear that difference. So I'm really into that. And the Golden 58, super cool. I don't think anything quite saturates like that. So having that live on, we only built 300 of that unit, so it's no longer in production. So it just made sense to have like that sort of live on in the digital cloud or whatever,
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite plugin that you use?
There's always a default one, Fab Filter is great just for quick fixes and anything surgical, and they're just reliable and they've been around forever, and it's just awesome. Let's see. Audio Thing is doing some interesting stuff. I don't know if you guys are hip to them. They just are making fun plugins, just kind of noise makers, and just weird stuff that you're not going to find anywhere else. And then Good Hurt. Are you guys hip to Good Hurt?
Yes, I'm familiar, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I've heard them in passing.
Yeah. A drummer friend of mine who does a lot of production hit me to them. And they do a lot of modeled stuff from like the hip hop era. This is the bus compressor that everybody was using, and it was something digital that awful, but now we're used to that sound and we want it. And they have tape comps and everything, and they're doing some great stuff. It's not a lot. It's few, and who else is good that I really like? There's always the folks like Waves and U Audio. Kit Plugins, I think they're based in Nashville. They're doing some cool stuff. That stuff seems always transient. I'm sure you probably have the same thing. It's like you bought 20 and you just remember that you still have them. I've actually been oh man, I need this plugin. It looks so good. It's like you bought it 2 years ago. Just pare down.
It's lost in the shuffle of the list.
Yeah.
That's the only bad thing about it is you can't see them.
Yeah. It's daunting opening up your plugin window sometimes and just
seeing the array of lists.
Yeah.
What was that one called again? If I see it, I'll know it, but what was the name of it? That's the worst part.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's one of the pros of hardware too. It's just like all our favorite, I always say it, all our favorite records that we grew up listening to, they had to make, I guess you would say, concessions or limitations of this is what you have to use in the hardware domain and use it the best you can. And with digital, it's just, you could just lose hours just going through that stuff. Like it could just be a huge time suck. And
been there, done that.
Yeah. And a waste of, and then maybe your creativity's spent, or after that. So I think, just getting those hardware pieces, especially I think you were mentioning something too earlier, Linda, tracking with the hardware as well.
Yeah.
Definitely a big difference than just. I think a lot of times with the products Audioscape makes, people just think of them as simply mixed tools. They're not. Yeah.
Not at all.
It's, you know what, it's gotten to the point where, especially with mixing, if I'm in the middle of a project, there's several mixes that just have to be, available. People are doing recalls and you can't just leave something up. So hardware is still it's kind of tough at the mix stage. It's not the most graceful workflow,
Yeah.
So I really like it at the tracking. And then if I'm reaching for something during the mix, then just commit it immediately. It is hardware. It's not just because your knob says the same thing. It's not going to be that tomorrow, So if you like it, just go for it. But there was something interesting that, so this last album that I was talking about, when I was mixing it, I completely went down the Chad Blake porthole, wormhole, right? And it's just, he was basically the cookbook. Just, if he does it, just do it. Don't ask questions. I don't consider myself a mix engineer. I do it out of necessity, which also means budget, whatever. If I had the money, Chad would have been on this, So he does a lot of stuff that in his processing, even with plugins, they're doing different things. It's like slow moving flangers. So even in his plugin, what's now a 100% plugin world, if he has to redo a mix, it's still going to have some variation and difference just because he's coming from the world where it was only hardware. And now he's translated that workflow to digital. And you still have that motion and that life in it. And it's really cool. He's a god.
Yeah, no, there's so many people that you're just blown away when you like watch their breakdown, or I know they even have like Mix with the Masters and they have all this stuff like right now where it's almost, you could just lose years just watching all of that, and it's, and be fun, but yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy. The workflows, and how everyone's different. I feel like some of the top tier mixers that have gone all in the box, obviously they've started with hardware. And I feel like maybe it's not so, I don't want to use the word good, but like it's, if you just start in digital and that's all where you stay.
Then you have no experience of what those plugins are actually used for.
Yeah. And I see a little bit of a disparity there.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, there's also the element with hardware. You're probably drawn to experimenting more with hardware than you would be a plugin. I mean, whoever, the all-in buttons trick on an 1176. If you were just pulling up a plugin and you didn't know that, and you weren't coming from the hardware world and that workflow, how would you know to do that? Hitting the comp even harder, just seeing how far you can take it. That kind of workflow really generates some great new ideas. And I don't know that plugins are necessarily where people go with that. I mean, I don't reach a plugin and let's just crank it and see what it does. It's a plugin. What, it's going to get warm sounding? I mean, it's a plugin,
Yeah. Yeah. That's where you notice a difference too. Like you start pushing it like that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like anything. It's like having a guitar amp, and you just change the settings, throw a different pedal at it. There's something, I think, more experimental maybe with hardware. But yeah, that's where mine lives. It's sort of on the tracking state. I can run it during mix, but I won't stay there. I'll commit it right away. So, there's no recall issues.
Nice.
Yeah.
Now, have you released any of your own work as an artist?
I have. I've done the, Requisite guitar album. I'm considering doing another Requisite guitar album, but I don't know how requisite I have to be.
Now, where can we find those? Are they available on iTunes, Spotify? Do you have a website that people can look at?
I do have a website. I think my driver's license picture is still the cover.
Love it.
From when I was 16. I'm more active on social media than in that, and even they're not enough. But yeah, I have an album that came out a while ago called Pulse, and that was all just, guitar-based instrumental. And then I did something with more of a band vibe that was called Some Blues. And right now I'm poking at the idea. I've got a couple friends who are encouraging that sometimes it helps, it helps study to go ahead and write. If I'm thinking about things and I'm studying things, somehow, if I just go ahead and try and write in that style or write with that idea and that concept in mind, it really solidifies the idea for me. So it may not be a great song, but it helps me get it together.
Yeah, but I think that's an important part of the process, because if sometimes you have to work through that as a creative person. And, if you don't do that, then you're just, you're sort of stifling yourself and you're not going to move forward, and in your craft. And I think it was interesting you were mentioning how you're learning every day. And I feel like that's so important. That's just something that we never talk about enough. Like, everybody just thinks you reach a certain level and that you're always a student of whatever it is in your field. You never stop, you stop learning, you're dead in the water,
It's
basically,
true.
Exactly.
Now, do you have your your Patreon channel up yet?
No, I want to get like 2 or 3 videos done and then run them by a couple friends just to see if I've accomplished what I set out to do before I just start putting stuff up. But I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks. I'll let you guys know, and you can check it out and tell me it's like, oh, this is just not no.
Let us know. Yeah, we'd love to check it out. Yeah, that'd be
definitely
awesome.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you would like to plug or promote?
Well, let's see. The Patron channel and all things Patron, that's good. I keep hitting your site, and I'm following the Wednesday, and is it still Saturday or Sunday now sales? Because I feel it's pulled to a certain piece of gear. It's pulling me. One of those
piece
EQs,
of gear is
that pull sound, the EQPA.
Oh, the pole. I see what you're pulling towards.
Yeah. Oh, you can't go wrong
that
with that
right there.
Yeah. Man. Yeah, that one. Which one is pulling you? Because there's the mid, and then there's the
EQPA.
Yeah. The EQPA. Yeah, that's what a gem. So I'm cleaning space here in one of these racks for that. That will be next. Nice. You know what? Talk about working remotely, right? And not everybody has a U87 and a Neve, and that shouldn't hinder the songwriting process, and it shouldn't hinder the forward motion of the album. But let's face it, you get some tracks and they're going to need a lot of help. And in fairness, I have found that those tracks that need a lot of help, run them again and again through hardware, and then go after them with the plugins after the fact. But you can get a lot of sauce out of them that way. So,
do you say a lot of sauce?
Yeah. So this will be next.
Chili sauce.
Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of times I feel like the MEQ is more underrated and not known as much, but guitar players in particular love the MEQ. They seem to gravitate towards that as a secret weapon for their guitar rig, or like their guitar bus even, and just get a pair of them. That's usually where you see that happen. But are you thinking with the EQP just for like mono tracks or stereo processing across your mix bus?
Well, the stereo would be 2. So yeah, 2 is more.
Yeah.
I think my first thought was just those mono tracks. There's just some. I don't EQ electrics that much. I'm always 2 or 3 mics, so there's not a lot of EQing that goes on, and I pretty much get it, going in. Acoustics always need something, and I'll EQ the acoustic with a 550 going in, but even after the fact, You tend to track dark. You always got to pull something out, and that'd be a real nice piece on acoustic. So that's what I was thinking: acoustics, vocal work, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's just something about they call it the Pultec trick, where you there's just I equate it to taking the blanket off the speakers.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's very magical, and it's one of those things where I find funny that like you think you have a track that sounds good, and then you do that, and you're like,
hello.
It didn't
Just
sound
came to
good
light.
compared to this. It did not sound good. Yeah, it's definitely got that wow factor.
It opens things up in a way, and it's extremely natural sounding. You know, it's very organic. That'll be next.
Awesome. Are those going to be on sale this week?
I don't think those are putting on special for a while. I think
They're
a little bit in the hole on them. On the production side. But yeah, I think we have caught up a little bit with the Optos. I gave them a little bit of a assist the last 2 weeks. So
because they were gone for a while too, right?
Yep.
The Optos,
We sort of moved to selling more on a lead time since we've been in the new spot, because we can accommodate, we can store more inventory, we can do things like that. So we still do drop inventory on Wednesdays and Saturdays, but I feel good because we have more available for site for sale on the site right now. But yeah, still like we dropped Optos on sale yesterday, so they're gone.
Right? Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where it still is Wednesdays and Saturdays, and sometimes things go quick as well. But
have you guys talked about that on the podcast? I mean, how you structure the sales, and people need to make an account and like set their clock, set a timer, because these pieces go fast. Have you guys talked about that?
Yeah, they do.
We have a little bit. I feel like we're getting there. There are some pieces that are a little bit more readily available, but still, like the Optos, like I said, they're gone. I don't think. We still have some stuff. Sometimes there's a couple little stragglers up there now, but it's great because during the pandemic, we couldn't, it was like what you're describing. It was like instantaneous. Like we'd work all week, feel good about ourselves working all week, and then we'd list, here's 10 of these, and then gone.
1 minute later.
I'd press the button and then I'd look and it's like, did I do this? Did I put this in stock? I'd hit refresh. And it was bad.
I love it though. I mean, it's just like these pieces, that's how they were bought, and I have them in my time. Oh, damn, I got to get home. I'm going to miss this.
Now, do you ever make your way to Florida? Have you been to Florida before?
Yeah, I've got some family there, some extended family there. I haven't been recently, but Well,
next time you're in the neighborhood, you have to stop on over.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're in Central Florida. We're about like a 45, 50 minutes from like all the touristy, like Universal, theme parks, all that stuff. But we're on the East Coast, the Atlantic Ocean there, Daytona Beach. So
the home of spring break in the 80s,
Yeah, spring break in the 80s is huge here.
Spring break.
The good old days.
So I'm curious, what's your most popular piece?
I feel like the Opto and the EQP have been duking it out for a while. They've been doing this sort of dance back and forth with which one wants to be the most popular, I guess. And then, of course, anything new we release, then there's usually a limited amount on that, and then people come with their pitchforks and but
I think it's mostly the Opto and the EQP.
Yeah, I think it's mainly those two.
Those are the most in demand.
All the hard to roll tube stuff.
Yeah.
And your DI. I have your DI as well.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
The DI
that's
is good.
Sweet piece. Yeah. That's great. I love it.
Didn't you release an updated version of that?
I think we did. Yeah, we did. We just did one where it's got a separate impedance switch or whatever recently. Yep.
Cool.
Yeah, the DI Plus or whatever, which is nice too.
I'm so curious. What got you guys onto this? I mean, what was the inspiration for this?
Well, where do you want to start?
Seriously.
I come from the musician side more than even the producer side. So I play guitar in bands and things like that. And I started just building guitar pedals first. I had a company doing that for a while. And with guitar pedals, I conferred with some people that were like, start with guitar pedals. You can't, kill yourself kind of thing,
Yeah.
So, you can get your hands in there. 9 volts is not going to really do much to you. So I started with that. And then, started building guitar amps after that. Just stuff I wanted, basically just necessity. Or I also liked with the guitar pedals, you could find and especially back then in 2007, 2008, you really wasn't a lot out there, a lot of info out there, and you could find a rare circuit and you could just build it, And that was cool. It was having your own music store right there. So that whole vibe was I was just down with that. I still actually miss that, just finding weird circuits and just building them. But
you had much more time then.
Yeah, I had more time then, and I used to raid the music store, Total Entertainment. I used to raid their back room, and I'd take stuff and I'd convert it. So I'd find old crappy solid state Dean Markley amps, and then I'd just rip them out, all the guts, and just wire Marshall 18 waters in there and stuff like that. Nice. Which I had a blast doing that. I still got a couple of those around, but so I was doing the band thing mainly, and doing some self-recording and stuff like that as well. And I would go into a lot of different studios, and really landed on this one studio that they had just a bunch of boutique handmade gear. And the results we got out of that studio in particular, I was like, wow, this is, and seeing them using Shadow Hills had just come out. They were doing a lot of cool stuff.
Right.
And it just blew my mind. I knew at that moment that's the stuff I wanted to build. So then I just set about building a point-to-point LA2A, with vintage iron. I didn't have even money back then to buy an original LA2A, so I just got all the old parts, all T4B cells, and I would repair them for people and things like that. Sort of cut my teeth with that, and it definitely learned a lot about what I wanted, when it came time to make a product like the Opto, because I knew that there was not a T4B on the market that was built like the old ones. So that's why we went about building our own T4Bs that's in the Opto. So it just sort of progressed from there, and that the bus comp just made sense to turn into a product first. Audioscape was the name of an original pedal design I had, and I just ripped that off real quick and chucked it on the front panel for the bus comp.
Nice.
And haven't thought about it since. So.
No, he hasn't shared with you the times when he was gigging. I would run front of house for them because I'm more from the engineer production side of things.
Okay.
And during the band breaks, during these gigs, you get 20, 30 minutes, and there was 3 a night. These are 4-hour-long gigs.
Yeah.
Right.
And during the break, everybody's outside smoking, drinking a beer, hanging out with everybody. No, not Chris. Chris would always be in the van, and I'd go in there and just kind of sneak in, what you doing, man? I'm getting these guitar parts here. And then another year would go by, and he'd come up to me, he's like, look who just bought a guitar pedal from me. And I'm like, holy shit. Bro, we sold 10 of these, and it just snowballed over the course of 3 years during that time. So I got to see firsthand the passion off stage went into the van, where he was selling on eBay at the time.
Yeah.
I believe, right?
Yeah,
that was it.
Even Audioscape started on eBay. They didn't even have reverb back then, you know. And I would use the same model for Audioscape that I did with it was called CBC Pedals, a guitar pedal company. And I'd be like, hey, say $15, get free shipping, go to the website. And then after about a year or almost a year, it just got to, there was no need to do that anymore. It's just I started listing at random times, this is built, let's just list it, and stuff would sell. Gone. And then we standardized the time to just be 8 p.m. So it all made sense once we started getting a few products going.
Yeah, I mean, it was really something to see, because at first when he started, he was doing everything out of his condo in the garage. And to see him do his homework during the gigs, you knew there was a passion for it, and it was going to turn into something much larger. And here we are, 15, 16 years later.
That's amazing.
So, it's been kind of cool. I love seeing how he's grown from that to now where he's selling out everything, on the weekends and weekdays. So kudos to him for that.
I was reading something, maybe on the site, you're still not going to retailers, right? You're still selling. You're going to avoid that for now. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it fits our ethos a little bit more. And even like in other countries, it's been a hurdle because, especially internationally, as you know, we don't want to keep people from getting our stuff so much. So we're starting to open up, like we have a website, an Audioscape EU website, for instance, that, we have our friends / partners, the session desk, running that for us because they're based there in the EU. So it's been a challenge to actually set up these websites in these areas instead of, so you can, it just makes sense to have like a website instead of just an Audioscape site and someone has to order it and then they have to deal with all the customs and things like that. So like the challenges of doing that and staying direct are very, very difficult as opposed to just going through dealers. But I feel like the end user, people who are buying it, they really benefit. And it's just, I like talking to people as well.
Yeah, it's more wholesome.
Yeah.
Keeps it more organic, and you're able to represent your brand the way it should be represented.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of middlemen personally.
Right.
Yeah.
Plus, it allows, the cost of everything to stay within the budget of majority of the people that need to use this equipment.
Yeah, and if they, people have questions, they have a need, I like being able to address that. We like being able to address that as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know what? That means a lot too, because I worked with you early on, Chris. I think something was fritzy on one of the bus comps. And you're like, oh, this is a simple fix. But it's not like going through a manufacturer. I'm emailing you. We're talking about it. It's like, what's this? What's this? I was sending you like video screenshots, to make sure I'm not crazy. Right. And it was just like a simple swap of a PC board, and then it's like, it does feel more organic. If you're going to use organic gear, it is nice to have an organic face and name and email address of somebody who can talk to you about it,
Yeah, that's, and to me, that's important that, anyone feels like, they're always covered. If they get anything Audioscape, it doesn't matter if it's, I know we have our standard warranty periods and all that. That's just whatever. But like if it's an Audioscape piece of gear, we always want it working. We want it, and I feel like we're, I think to our benefit, a younger workforce as well.
Yep.
We're going to be around a while. And that's, sometimes people tell me like, oh, you look a little too young to be doing this. And I'm sure if I grew out my beard, I'd probably look older or something. But that's a good thing.
That is.
Like if, there's a little bit more youthful energy going on there. I feel like long term, zooming out at the big picture, I do feel like that's a pro. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Well, I think Audioscape is enabling people to have these pieces in their studio that would otherwise be just completely cost prohibitive. And now you can add this extra dimension to your work and your recordings and your environment. And I think they're a no-brainer.
Yeah. That's the goal. It's like we're all listening to music, right? I want to turn on, whatever, streaming station it is now or whatever, and hear, that we've made an impact on that, and that I feel like it sounds, music is getting better overall because of that. I think a lot of us came up in that era where digital transitioned, and we heard that, and I think there's been I don't want to use the word backlash, but there's been a course correction going on, and we're grateful if we can be, help be a part of that course correction for sure.
It's the extra level of quality, and people do hear it, and I think it makes it's a different workflow, but it's a more valuable workflow. And, you get it organized, you do it as you're tracking. It's just as seamless as anything else, and it just gives you that extra shine. So it's absolutely important.
The extra sauce.
No, thank you.
Yeah,
thank you,
extra sauce.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. Appreciate your work. Using it every day.
Appreciate that. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up. Is there any more questions you had for us?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Very good.
I want to just go jam on all your amps.
Yeah.
They're fun. They're fun.
They are fun. I like
and I got my
like
pre-CBS divided by 13s there, the pre-buyout.
Nice.
Sweet.
Man, I see. Yeah, you got some. Is that a Fender Champ over there on the left? And I'm looking on a little screen here. So, well, I say left. It might be your right.
Yeah.
So down there's a little reverb, and next to that I got a little AC-15. The reverb I think is 72, maybe 73. Got another divider back there. You probably can't see. That's a CJ. That's an EDT. The two divided there. 59 hardwired. Below that is a JCM 800. The Park is my newest. That's a P50. Oh, drool.
Digging that one.
Yeah, that's the FTR is above that, and then the top one is the BTR, which is KT. Is that KT 88? I think so. Kind of a voxy kind of punch on that.
Wow.
One of everything.
Yeah, wall of guitar amps just makes me happy. So
Yes.
I'm sure it does with you as well. And I know we were talking about tube rolling a little bit earlier. We could have just made this whole episode about tube rolling.
Yeah.
Seriously. Seriously.
I could talk about that all day.
I keep a box. I keep my tube gloves because I've learned that you don't have to really unplug it. You can just go to standby if you're just swapping a preamp tube. So I've got my big, utility gloves, and because I'm such a baby about it, and it takes all afternoon.
Yeah, it does. And people don't realize those preamp tubes, they last a long time comparatively to power tubes as well. They do have some, one of those things. One thing I noticed very different from tube rolling, with the guitar amp versus say this gear, like these compressors, tube compressors, things like that, is I feel like sometimes guitar amps are more forgiving, or you're more forgiving of maybe noise or something like that. Whereas in a recording pro audio device, it's
no noise.
Yeah, you
noise,
get the tube in there, it's good, and then the hum creeps up, and you're
Yeah, it matters. I think the tolerances are always going to be more for guitar amps, and then as I'm learning, the certain amps like the Marshalls, I like the old American tubes in them. The newer ones, they want the just standard JJs that you get off Amazon. I start to get creative with my divided, try to put a bugle boy in there, and it's doesn't work. So hence the boxes of tubes.
I think that's so cool that you're hands-on with everything like that.
Well, that's as far as I go with amps. I watched tutorials on how to bias them, and I was just what's that part about dying again? Because you turn it off and there's still electricity going. What's that part again? It's no.
Oh, well, you don't always die. I'm proof.
Just a nice jolt.
Yeah.
Wake you up
it'll wake you up.
It's a nice jolt. I went down the path of soldering my own cables for a long time, but after I burnt my hands enough times and every single one of them failed, I just figured, this is not really for me. So
yeah,
certain amount of maintenance.
Yeah, soldering's an interesting thing. I feel like that's one where just like the tools we use, we choose guitar amps, gear, getting a good soldering iron was that's when my eyes really opened up, to I was doing it wrong. I got the cheapest little one or whatever.
Radio Shack one.
Yeah.
Yeah, Radio Shack, absolutely.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much today, Linda, for your time and joining us on the Sonic Truth
Justin.
podcast.
Thank you, Chris.